Howdy y'all, Banjo Ben here on my back porch. This is actually my kitchen out here. This is where I serve all you cabin campers barbecue. Speaking of cabin camp, I've got a great lesson for you today, all about the Nashville Number System. Well, I call it a lesson. It's more like a course. This is near an hour worth of content. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at what the Nashville Number System is and why it's important for you, even though you may not live in Nashville. We're going to apply this Nashville Number System to melodies, and then to licks, and then of course to chord progressions in songs. And I have a pretty cool fact for you today. When you finish with this course, you're going to be able to take any lick you know and any song that you know how to play, and you'll be able to play those things in any key that you want. That's a pretty great challenge, isn't it? You don't believe me? Well, watch the course and find out for yourself. If you're watching somewhere else besides banjobenclark.com, I'd be honored to have you on board the site where you can access this course as a Gold Pick member, as well as hundreds of more video lessons. If you're already watching here on the site, just scroll down, click on the next video, and don't forget to download that PDF chart where I have all kinds of goodies. Let's go. Now this morning, we're going to talk a bit about the Nashville Number System. So if you have your folders with you, if you don't, that's okay. But if you have your folders with you, we're going to be looking at the page in there that looks exactly like this one. The Nashville Number System is quite a helpful tool. I'll explain to you why. Demonstrate a little bit on the guitar as well. The Nashville Number System was invented, so to speak, although it is a conglomeration of musical ideas that's been happening for a long time. But Nashville Number System specifically was conceptualized in Nashville, as it's called, in the 50s, I believe. It might have been the 60s. I should have looked that up for sure. But it can be traced back to a vocal group called the Jordanaires. You heard of the Jordanaires? The Jordanaires were extremely busy in the studios in those days, not just with Elvis, but with everybody. And they would be singing all kinds of songs with all kinds of parts. And they would often have to change keys on the fly. Maybe they got into the studio and what the producer thought was going to happen in D now needed to be moved to E, or needed to be moved to C. And what they found was that standard notation, music as we know it, was too cumbersome to be able to adapt to those quick changes. So they conceived the Nashville Number System somewhat as a shorthand method to be able to communicate musical ideas. How many of you would say you're familiar with the Nashville Number System? Okay. How many have never heard of it before? Okay, good. Well, we're going to learn some things this morning. Even if you've heard of it, we're going to learn some things. Now, most of us are probably not going to spend our futures in Nashville recording studios playing sessions for a living. So you say, well, why is the Nashville Number System useful for me? It's useful because it is a form of communication that we're going to use even today and tomorrow, and with your bandmates, with your jam mates going forward. But beyond that, it's a helpful tool to help you be able to play in different keys more easily. And that's what we're after. I don't spend time on theory that's not usable. We'll leave that to the really smart folks. All I have time for, my brain, all it has room for is theory that I can put into practice. So that's why I wanted to cover this with you today. Okay, who can tell me how many total different notes you can play on a guitar? How many, or let me put it this way, how many notes are in a 1-octave chromatic scale? 12 notes. So when you think about even a piano, there's 88 keys, but there's only 12 different notes that you can play. After you go through 12 notes, if you play all the white, black, white, black, white, black, or on a guitar, if you play all the frets, after you get to 12, you start over again. You hit a new octave and you keep following that same pattern. Now, within those 12 notes, we can get all kinds of patterns. We can pick and choose which of those 12 notes to play. We refer to those as scales. Okay? There are other parts of the world that have more than 12 notes. It sounds weird to our ears when we hear those cultures' music, But here in the West, we're conditioned to hear these 12 notes. And beyond that, we're conditioned to hear what we call a major scale. And a major scale is just a certain arrangement, a certain order of 7 of these 12 notes. So that means there's going to be 5 of them that we're going to skip in order to get a major scale. And there's a certain formula that we can follow at all times to find a major scale. And I like to teach the major scale, and I like to highlight it because I think of all of our other scales as just versions of the major scale. We're just going to start manipulating it a little bit. We might leave a couple notes out and get what we call a pentatonic scale. We might take a few of the notes and move them 1/2 step left or right, and we get minor scales and blues scales. But this morning we're going to think about the major scale, and the pattern that we're going to follow as we're traveling up that piano keyboard to get a major scale is this: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Have you heard me say that before? Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. What do I mean by that? Well, let's pick up a guitar. And let's start on the lowest note that a guitar can give us, that low E. If I were to go 1 fret above the open string, how far have I gone? What would we call that? A half step. 1 fret is a half step. So if I were to travel by half steps up the neck of the guitar, I would play all 12 of those notes available to us, and I would be playing what's called a chromatic scale. What if I skip a fret and go from open to 2nd fret? What do we call that? A whole step. That's right, we get a whole step. So if we want to play an E major scale, then we can follow this pattern that you see pointed to with the little arrows, and we can follow whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. We will start with a root, and we'll end on another root that's 1 octave above. Let's just try that. We start here. A whole would take us to 2nd fret. Another whole. A half. A whole. A whole. A whole. A half. And we've arrived there at a new root. And we should be able to hear that. Right? Okay. Now, we refer to that root, or to that note that we start on to make our major scale. We refer to that as the root, or we might give it a number. And we are today. We're going to call it number 1. And every major scale note that we climb up, we're going to give it the next number, 1 through 7. So again, if I follow that same pattern, I have root, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root. Now here's the cool thing. After we know how to do that, here's what you can confidently do. You can play a major scale in any key you want to, on any instrument you want to, as long as you find out how to play a half step or a whole step on it. So each of you can go to a piano right now, whether you know it or not. Take this formula and play me an F sharp major scale. You can do it right now. And I'll prove it to you. Let's play an F sharp major scale on a guitar. What do we need to know? We need to know where an F sharp is, right? So let's grab the 4th fret on the D string. And if we follow our pattern, it looks like this. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So we're hearing the same patterns happen. They just have different starting places, right? What we call that, in musical terms, we call that a modulation, okay, or transposition, where we take one group of notes and we move it to a different key. We transpose those notes. We modulate to a new key, and we carry that pattern with us to a new key. Why would that be helpful as pickers?
How to sing to it.
Yeah, how to sing.
So
and if you
everything in A.
yeah. If you find an A lick that you really, really love, guess what you also know? You also know that lick in 11 other keys as we get a handle on this. So it begins to break down barriers that we have as musicians. And I remember being there and knowing how to play a song in G, but then meeting up with somebody that wanted to play it in A and saying the words, "I'm sorry, I only know it in G." Have you been there? I have. Okay, so these are the types of things that we need to know to begin breaking down those barriers.